you this. I think maybe Thursday was the last time I was able to do a live stream. Things just got busy, but here we are. We're back, and yeah. So sleeping baby rules apply. Of course, as usual, she's asleep upstairs. So if she wakes up, I gotta go up and get her. But yeah, so talking about the big news really is the war in Ukraine, and of course, Joe Rogan talked about it and got an enormous backlash from a bunch of people who, uh, very clearly feel strongly that we need to continue this war. And it amazed me how many people actually are in favor of this war and how many people think that we need to be over there. We need to be funding this. We need to have all of our resources being sent over there. In fact, there's new developments on that front. Um, France and the UK are talking about sending troops on the ground into Ukraine to go and assist now that we know that North Korea has put troops into Russia. At what point do we call this a world war, by the way? So if we've got North Korea, Russia, Ukraine, France, and the UK, there's 5 countries, and then the US, obviously, sending all of these weapons. There's 6 countries involved, spanning 3 continents. That's a lot. That is a lot, man. That's we're verging on that point where it turns goes from being just a local conflict over territory to a full-on world war. And what's crazy is this war over the 3 regions of Ukraine, the Donetsk, the Luhansk, and the Donbass. Um, those 3 regions were the only territories within Ukraine that were actually financially in the black. They weren't losing money. So Ukraine wanted them and Russia wanted them. But the reason was, it wasn't for any reason about, Russia talked about, we're going to protect these ethnic Russians and all of this. No, it was the coal deposits. They wanted the coal out of these 3 regions. And in order to get protection for their invasion, Russia actually made a backdoor deal with China before any of this started. And there's articles to that effect that came out about 21 or 22. I don't remember. It was quite some time ago. But China pretty much ensured that Russia could do this invasion, no problem whatsoever, as long as they agreed to sell the coal to China. Have their little coal deal. There'd be cheaper coal for China, and Russia would gain new territory. That was kind of their deal. And of course, Ukraine wanted these areas because they wanted the profit. And those regions, I think the Donbass had a vote and they voted to join Russia, but the other 2, Donetsk and Luhansk, said they don't want either one. Like, they wanted to be their own coalition. And I think that was the first choice of Donbass as well before they re-voted. So it's very, very interesting. There's more to it than just big bad Russia invaded Ukraine. There's a lot of geopolitics going on here, and if you don't know it, then the whole thing seems pretty cut and dry. But it's not. It's very entangled. And something else that I learned about just today is that they say there was a ship's anchor that cut the communications in the Baltic Sea, cut the cables. Apparently, that was a Chinese ship, which, what the hell was that doing in the Baltic Sea? The Chinese have no military presence over there, allegedly, and there's no reason, there's no territories, there's no reason for them to be present over there in the Baltic Sea. So, China is kind of doing what the U.S. is doing. They're sitting there in the background, doing a little thing here, a little thing there. Although the U.S., it seems that the U.S. is far more involved than China. China is definitely involved behind the scenes, but we're publicly, giving long-range missiles to Ukraine, which, they're using to target military and infrastructure targets deep within Russia. And then the world had a meltdown when Russia dared to fire back an ICBM. It's like, well, what did you expect? What did you expect to happen? NATO's out here backing Ukraine. Ukraine right now is conscripting 60-year-old men They've run through all of their young men. They've killed them all. And now they're conscripting 60-year-olds. And what's crazy to me is that Zelensky is not willing to come to the table. Putin has agreed to negotiate, but only with Trump, which is kind of amusing. But when Zelensky and Putin will not well, Putin will come to the table, but Zelensky won't. It's because Zelensky knows he has the might of NATO behind him, and because we continue to back them, this slaughter just continues, and it's to grease the pockets of these war hawk Democrats and Republicans in Washington D.C. You know, they're the lobbyists for Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and all of these companies are obviously in there forcing, well, not forcing, but what's the word? Manipulating? No, that's not the right word either. Coercing. There's a good word. Coercing the Congress people to continue to send money to Ukraine. They're in it for personal gain. I mean, think about a crazy exercise in corruption is to Google. You know, we know that House of Representatives people make what $170,000 a year, and senators make something like 200. And when you go look at their net worth, like Nancy Pelosi, for example, is worth over 200 million. Now, some of that's insider trading, which is corruption in and of itself, but a lot of it comes from lobbyists. She's getting paid to give speeches to, you know, large corporations, whether that be pharma or, you know, defense contractors or whatever it is. Dan Den, hello, you speak China. I do not. But all of them are doing the same thing. They're all sitting there taking these huge checks. I mean, Bernie Sanders, for crying out loud, Bernie Sanders took over $1 million from pharmaceutical companies. Elizabeth Warren took like 700,000. It's shameful the way that these people act. You know, they talk about we're for the people, by the people. You know, we were voted in for, you know, the right reasons. We're here to change. They're not. They're not. They're in there to make money, every one of them, and it's the swamp for a reason. I don't think that it's possible to have people who are not part of the swamp up there in D.C., or at least not for very long, and not very many of them, because what ends up happening is you get introduced, number one, you get introduced to money. And you get introduced to the special interest groups who say, hey, you know, we'll give you X amount of dollars to, you know, consider this when you're voting. They don't say we'll pay you to vote. It's just, we'll consider this. And then, you know, we'd like to invite you to speak about why you decided that. And then you go speak and you get a donation check for your campaign and, you know, and so on. But the other thing that happens is once you're in D.C., they start to tell you, hey, if you don't toe the line, we're going to primary you. We're going to put all of the money and power that we have behind your opponent, and your opponent is going to beat you. You'll be in for one term, and then you'll be out. And, you know, for example, if you look at some of the more radical members of the Democratic Party, for example, the Squad, the AOCs of the Democratic Party, when push comes to shove, when you start to see the votes happen on the floor, they fall in line with the Democrats. And it's because they know that they will be primaried if they don't vote the way that the machine wants them to vote. And this is why we call it the swamp. And Joe Rogan, you know, when Joe Rogan says F Zelensky, F Putin, he is right. He's right about all of that. They are actively trying, it seems, to start World War III. And the news that France and the UK are considering stepping in and sending ground troops to Ukraine is absolutely appalling. Aside from the fact that this would escalate again, there was no vote for this. There was no vote in France or the UK for this, but they're considering it, and they would go ahead and just do it. This is a big reason why I am not pro-NATO. I'm anti-NATO. You have these international governments out here making decisions to, you know, to send military forces, start a war that we don't know how it ends. because the only logical answer we can come up with is in a nuclear holocaust. And if that is the way that it's going to end, if we knew for sure that the Ukraine war would end in a nuclear war, how many people would actually support it? I don't think near as many people would support us funding them if we knew for sure that there was going to be a nuclear option used. And unfortunately, it looks as though that nuclear option, if France and the UK decide that they're going to send these troops into Ukraine, then you're looking at almost definitely uh, retaliation from Russia in the form of nukes. And with their nuclear doctrine being downgraded, they can essentially start firing nukes now that the US has given these long range missiles to Ukraine. And Russia sent that ICBM as a warning, is like, look, you're not leaving us much of a choice, because when you look at the NATO countries, how strong are they compared to Russia? Well, they're obviously far stronger than Russia. But the problem is, if Russia lets loose that nuclear arsenal, then I mean, the whole world is going to go up in flames, because if they let loose and we let loose, and then Iran, and if Iran has developed them, they say they have, but um, China and North Korea, everybody just starts firing nukes, then there's nowhere any of us can hide. And by the way, Russia uh, has been ordering bomb shelters and putting them in all their cities. They've been building, like, mass producing bomb shelters. That's scary. Let's see, RJ, who's your favorite Muppet? The Swedish Chef. I saw that you said that later, but yeah, it has to be the Swedish Chef, because earlier today, actually, it's really strange that you say that, because the Swedish Chef actually came up earlier today. I was watching a YouTube video, and there was a guy from Sweden, and were doing Swedish Chef speak at him. It was really funny. Basliel says Rusky. NATO ain't ish for Russia. Unfortunately, NATO would absolutely demolish Russia if they, went together with a declaration of war. What's going to happen is not that, though, because the people that are in charge, that are being paid by lobbyists, the war machine, the highly paid bureaucrats, all of this, their money comes from dragging this war on. That's why every president except Trump here lately has been starting new wars. They're making far too much money off of it to let this go. They want that paycheck from Northrop Grumman. They want that paycheck from Raytheon. So it's hard to sit here and watch this, especially the thing that really pisses me off, and I think I've probably mentioned this 100 times, but the thing that really pisses me off is that we are funding Ukraine's their pensions, their infrastructure, everything. We've got homeless veterans here. We've got 70 and 80-year-olds who are taking jobs as Walmart greeters because they can't afford to live off their pensions. And here we are funding this other country and funding wars. It's disturbing. Like, the fact that so many people are okay with this it's insane. But it also stems from the misconception that, poor Ukraine didn't do nothing, and big bad Russia invaded, and it's just Russia versus Ukraine, and there's no room for the nuance of this war that is, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Donbass wanted to be their own thing. They wanted out, and Ukraine was literally shelling their own people, and Russia was like, oh, we're going to come protect ethnic Russians, when in reality it was all about the coal deposits. That is what happened. Monkey Juice. Name one atheist that started a war. I don't know. I'm sure there's been one at some point, right? I don't know. I wouldn't say one hasn't. Connor says, because you're American, you're all fucking retards. Hey, at least I know that that's the wrong form of your. So there's that. Monkey Juice. Ukraine gets 3% of the U.S. military budget. Isn't that crazy, dude? Like, the U.S. military budget is like $820 billion. It's like, was it 825? Is that what it was this last year? And then they audited them, and they couldn't account for like 60% of it. That's nuts. That's nuts. And they no, it was they couldn't account for 60% of their 4.5 trillion in assets, and then like some insane number of the budgetary spending as well. Like they failed an audit again. Like we should not be sending this kind of money anywhere. Like what's 3% of 800, right? You know, it's like what 25 ish that 824. So like 3% of that's like 25 billion. Like that's insane. We shouldn't be sending them that money. And by the way, we've sent them tens and tens of billions. In fact, I think it's hundreds of billions at this point. Like somewhere around $200 billion already. It's absolutely nuts, man. Oh, Julian A. Young. Hey, it's Debase Seattle, bro. What's up, dude? Yeah, I couldn't believe it, man. When I saw that France and the UK were talking about sending ground troops into Ukraine, I just like that blew my mind. Like, are we to that point where we're ready to see this all go up in smoke? Because that's what will happen if we escalate like that. If NATO escalates in that way, Russia's going to say no. They're going to say no option but nukes, and that they're going to push that red button. I mean, Putin has said he's willing to come to the table with Trump. Zelensky is not. Zelensky refused. Actually, Trump made put out a deal to Zelensky like a couple days after he was voted in, and Zelensky immediately said no. So, and Zelensky's out here demanding, you know, the anti-personnel mines and all that sort of thing that Biden, of course, granted. Just absolutely insane. Steezy Goon, Trump needs to ban all call centers in the States. There's been a high rise of fraudulent cases. Oh, yeah, dude. All the, like, I work with a bunch of older folks because, you know, I'm a home health therapist. So I go in, these people are just getting spam call after spam call. People trying to get their social security number, trying to steal their welfare check or their social security check. Like, it's despicable, man. RJJ, remember, 10% for the big guy. That's right. Exactly. 10% for the big guy. Julian A. Young, other countries like Australia and France send volunteers, and we're surprised when they send in the North Koreans. Yeah, exactly. Well, and there's been a lot of like U.S. people going over there. Like they just volunteer and they go over and fight because they really believe in this cause, and I think they believe in the cause because they've been lied to about how it happened. You know, it was a territory dispute between Ukraine and Russia, and it was three territories banding together that wanted to leave Ukraine. But they didn't want to be part of Russia either. They wanted to be their own coalition because financially, the Donbass, Luhansk, and Donetsk were all in the black. They didn't want to be part of Ukraine because Ukraine was going bankrupt. And they have massive coal deposits there, which keeps their economies afloat, and Russia wanted that coal. And so Russia found a nice little excuse. Oh, there's ethnic Russians. Let's go and liberate them. None of that has to do with us. And we're not even allies with Ukraine. There was no reason for us to interfere in this other than Ukraine has been a massive money laundering operation for the last, since the 90s, since the Soviet Union ended. I mean, we installed Zelensky back in 2014. We've had our finger in that pie for quite a while. Ugh. I mean, I can't tell you how much I despise these people that are leading us this way into war. I'm a non-interventionist, and there's a lot of people that are like that. There's also people that are interventionists that are looking at this being like, what the hell are we doing? Like, what do we stand to gain from this? But, well, that's going to be about it for tonight. My baby just woke up. I'm going to go get her, but thanks for hanging out, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.